Kia ora koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everyone. We are now 7 hours into Alert Level 3 restrictions in Auckland and Alert Level 2 in the rest of the country. I'm going to pass shortly to Dr Bloomfield to provide an update on the latest health and testing information. Before I do, there are a couple of key messages I really want to emphasise, so I'm going to start with right at the top of my remarks. We have thankfully been without loss of life via COVID-19 for some time. But that is still the primary reason we take these strict, short and sharp measures. COVID kills people. Just recently, we saw the United States mark a devastating milestone in terms of the scale of lives lost in their country. We must never lose sight of the reason we take these measures. It is to save our people's lives and to save their livelihoods. The second reminder is that we know what to do. We have to just make sure we all do it well. So here are our asks. If you have visited any of the sites of interest that cases have been to, or have any cold and flu symptoms, including aches and fatigue, please get tested straight away. We need people to get tested as soon as they become sick so we can get on top of these latest events and stop any potential spread. Secondly, when you get a test, you must isolate at home until you receive a negative test result. You are not allowed to go to work or to any other place until you are given the all clear. There is financial support available to help anyone who may need to miss work for that reason. I'll share further details on that later on. Third, we need people to stay home to break the chain of transmission. If you can work from home, please do. You should only be leaving your house for essential reasons such as going to the supermarket. We've beaten COVID's chain of transmission before, and it's even more important that we do it again. That's because we are dealing with a more transmissible strain, but also because we are so close to getting an extra layer of protection into our border system through our vaccine rollout. We just need to keep going. I'll now pass to Dr Bloomfield before coming back with a few extra details about our response. Dr Bloomfield.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Kia ora koutou katoa. So today I can report there are no new positive cases of COVID-19 in the community. And on our 2 positive cases announced last evening, Case M has moved already to the Auckland quarantine facility, and his mother, who tested positive late yesterday, is on the way. The balance of the family, who again have already been tested and returned to negative tests, is currently isolating at home with support. Now, as you would have heard from the whole genome sequencing information that was shared earlier today, this case M has the same variant of the virus, the B117 variant, first identified in the UK. And furthermore, the advice we have from ESR is that that most closely links back to one of our families already identified in this cluster, the second of the families that includes cases D, E, F, G and H. Our contact tracers have already been able to identify a link between the 2 families, which is very helpful and also consistent with the results of the whole genome sequencing. Furthermore, all the genome sequencing in the cases to date does suggest or supports that they are all part of a single cluster. They are all linked, and that reinforces that we are still only looking for one source of infection. We haven't got multiple infections that have led to a range of different clusters. And the sequencing of the mother of case N in the family is expected back later today. We do continue the overall source investigation. That's a focus, and that work has been led by Auckland Regional Public Health with support from ourselves at the Ministry of Health and ESR, and the whole genome sequencing will of course help with that, as will investigating any epidemiological links. Our wastewater testing in Auckland continues to not identify any wider cases in the community. There are plenty of testing stations open today across the Auckland region. The locations are on the Auckland Regional Public Health website. And by 10:30 this morning, already seeing a great response with 755 tests already completed by that time across Auckland. Thank you to those who are coming forward. And we do want the people to be tested, being those who have been at those locations of interest at the time of interest, or people who are symptomatic. Others who do not have symptoms or were not at those locations of interest, even if you're worried, please don't go out to be tested at the moment. The best thing you can do is your contribution is actually to stay at home and be isolated as you should be doing under Alert Level 3. That's the most important thing you can do. The locations of interest are being consistently updated as we get more information available, and they're on the Locations of Interest webpage on the Ministry of Health's website. Interviews continue with the 2 new cases and their family, and I would like to reiterate that there is strong focus of interest for our public health teams in Auckland is to identify any close contacts from the Manukau Institute of Technology, given the time the case spent there on the 22nd, 24th and 25th of February. At this stage, we've identified around 20 close contacts from there, and others who may attend the MIT, please do look on the website as to the instructions of what you should do. At the very least, you should currently be isolating and remaining at home. Just on the MIT campus, last night as we released the information, we gave the address of the campus as the Otara campus as we moved at pace last night, and there was also some incorrect dates published. The correct dates of exposure, as I said, are February the 22nd, 24th and 25th, and the correct information is now on our website. Healthline has brought in additional staff today to help meet demand, and yesterday spoke to 2,790 people. A reminder, please leave Healthline for people who do need information about being tested as part of the current investigation, or who have other health issues they need advice on. If you just need general information, including places where you can get a test, then please look on the websites for that information. In terms of how the border arrangements are working around the Auckland region, the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment is working with the Ministry of Justice to ensure essential workers have got the permissions they need to get through the border, and that process to date has been working very well. Finally, just a couple of important reminders from me. This new variant of the virus, the B117, does seem to be presenting with symptoms that are not the typical respiratory symptoms. So a reminder to people, if you do have muscle aches and fatigue, rather than runny nose or sore throat, please do consider that they could be COVID-19 symptoms and seek advice about getting a test. And a reminder to everyone just that a good rule of thumb for the level 3 requirements in place in Auckland is, of course, stay at home as much as possible. If you can work from home, do so. If you don't need to go out, please don't go out. You shouldn't be socialising, inviting friends over. Schools and educational institutions are closed, as are large events. And I know there'll be a lot of disappointed people who couldn't attend and participate in the Round the Bays event this morning. You will be disappointed. I just want to acknowledge that. But thank you for your support, and to all Aucklanders for really, really thinking hard about what you can do to abide by the Alert Level 3 restrictions on movement, because that is how we will now really get around this latest outbreak and stamp it out for good. Thanks, Prime Minister.
Thanks, Dr Bloomfield. So as you have heard, there are no further cases today, and secondly, we have a possible person-to-person link for how cases M and N, our most recent cases, may have picked up the virus. That is good news. If this link is confirmed, it means we can feel confident we know what has happened, and we don't have a range of other chains of transmission to potentially chase. We can build a very direct picture of how our latest COVID cases became infected. However, finding the source of this case was only one of the reasons we moved to Alert Level 3. The other reason was the number of exposure events for the latest case, with potentially large groups of people over a sustained period of time. That high number of events means it's more than likely there will be additional cases in the community, but they might not show up in test results for a few more days yet. That is why it is so important close and those casual contacts of all our COVID cases get tested in the coming days. Getting tested and staying home and isolated will help us to save lives and ensure we get the economy back up and running as soon as we can. We do undertake regular check-ins with those we've explicitly asked to isolate as a contact, and we will continue to do that. If we have any concerns that those who are meant to be isolating are not, Health will work with police to check in on those that we feel the need to. We know staying at home can be hard for many families. The government has taken action to ensure whānau is supported to stay at home
Health
to break
will work
the
with
chain of
police.
transmission. We did that some time ago. We've already stood up a range of business supports for this purpose. The wage subsidy scheme will be in place for this period of restrictions and covers the whole country as well as Auckland. Support will be provided in 2 weekly payments, and total support will match the duration at Alert Level 3 to the nearest fortnight. Payment rates are $585.80 per week for each full-time employee and $350 per part-time employee. Businesses can also apply for the short-term absence payment if they've been advised that their worker or a self-employed person is staying at home or waiting for a test result, or are a household member or contact of someone who needs to stay home because they've potentially come into contact with COVID-19. This is a one-off payment of $350. On this, I want to thank the many businesses who have been proactive in this space, helping to keep their workforce safe. But I also have a new request. Please check with your workforce to see if any are close or casual contacts of any of these cases or have visited any of the sites of interest, and ensure if they are amongst those who need to be isolating, make sure they don't come to work and that they get tested. Please also make sure that you access absence payments so you're able to continue to support your workers financially. Beating COVID is a team effort. And despite our best efforts to date, recent cases have gone to work when they shouldn't have. All of us need to do what we can to ensure those who are most at risk of having the virus staying at home. Doing so will help us get back to lower alert levels quicker and ultimately keep everyone safe. Also available is the Leave Support Scheme, which is for those who meet certain criteria and have to self-isolate, cannot go to work and cannot work from home. MSD, whānau Ora and other agencies are standing up additional support to ensure testing and welfare support is in place for the community. We'll post this information on the COVID-19 website and update you regularly throughout the week on where to go to for support if you need it. We're also making sure we're putting out that information widely on social media, including all of the different absence and leave payments that are available. Finally, I want to acknowledge the frustration I've seen and I've heard overnight, particularly coming, rightly so, from many Aucklanders. No one wants COVID in our community, but equally, we won't beat it by turning on each other. We know what works to stop COVID, staying at home and getting tested, and we need to do that again. We also know that checking in on friends and family and supporting everyone to stick to the rules is the best way we can make the next 7 days a success and get our freedoms back more quickly. Our efforts as a team last year meant New Zealand has enjoyed more freedoms over the past 12 months than nearly any other country in the world. With our border vaccination program rolling out and with families of border workers due to start getting their vaccine this week, we are also significantly reducing the risk of these kinds of flare-ups occurring again. So we are nearly there. In the meantime, let's stick together, let's support one another through the week. We've done it before and we will do it again. Happy to take questions.
Prime Minister,
Jessica.
we've had reports of groups of people this morning meeting. What are you going to do to deal with rule breakers?
Oh, look, feel free to, and we'll keep a scan of the media where you're reporting that that's occurring. As you'll recall, the last time we went into this alert level in Auckland for a prolonged period, the police were involved in making sure that different groups that were convening knew that they were in breach of the order in place that says no public gatherings.
If they didn't know about it, have you done your job properly?
Well, look, ultimately we do everything we can in terms of sharing the message as soon as we can. We use the civil defence alerts. Many of you will have received that blurring through on your phone once the alert level was in place. You do a job of helping us amplify that. We are always looking for more and better ways to communicate, particularly with harder to reach communities where there may be language barriers. But we try to leave as little excuse as possible for not hearing the message that we are in alert level 3 in Auckland.
These health check-ins that health are doing to ensure that people are isolating, how often have those spot checks been happening to date, and are you going to ramp that up more now that we know that people haven't been doing as they were told?
Well, of course, the vast majority will be. What we have here are a handful of cases where they haven't, and it has had dire consequences. So those check-ins via the phone, what we will be doing is enabling health, of course, to work with police where they have concerns that someone is not following the rules to have a check-in in place.
The question was around the frequency to date and then whether you're going to ramp that up now.
Dr Bloomfield.
Yes, so the last time we really deployed this was during the Auckland August outbreak when we were in a similar situation and we just needed to be confident. So what the teams will do is their close contacts are on daily phone calls anyway.
Yeah.
And in this situation, what we will do is if they can't get a hold of people at home where they expect to be able to get hold of them, then they will do door-to-door visit. If necessary, we can involve the police in that as well. But we did get used to doing this, and it was deployed back at the Auckland August outbreak.
When those test results start coming in from Case M's close and casual plus contacts, if they are returning negative results and there aren't any more positive cases in the community, is there any way that we would move down alert levels sooner?
Well, I think one of the things that we're feeling quite cautious about is the fact that this particular variant does seem to be suggesting that it has a longer tail. And so it may be that we have a clear period and we may see positives slightly later down the track. So we'll want to take advice from officials and our experts on that. Dr Bloomfield, do you want to add?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, we are seeing with this variant just some unpredictability, and this is what we saw in the school where we had when the decision was made to take Auckland out of Alert Level 2 to Alert Level 1, we had a lot of information. Out of the close contacts in the class of our initial our initial case A, we had one who had tested positive. We had none from over 95% of testing in the wider school. But then one appeared just right at the last minute there. So we've followed that through. We had nothing further from the workplaces or any other places at that time. So I think what we'll be doing is reflecting on the fact that KCM was out in the community and potentially infectious right up until yesterday. So we will want to be very certain that we have captured any potential possible infections before we start giving advice about
Given that unpredictability and the infectiousness of the virus, are you confident level 3 is actually enough?
Yes, at this point we are, and I've canvassed that with my advisors, and I think you'll see the commentary from other epidemiologists and so on agreeing that at this point in time that is appropriate. As long as people do everybody does what they need to do in Alert Level 3. The idea is to restrict movement here, and so people should be thinking about how they can basically stay at home as much as possible.
As little human-to-human contact as possible is what we ask at Level 3. Keeping in mind, of course, whilst we've generally asked Auckland to be at Level 3, those who are identified as being contacts of these cases, they're in a full lockdown. That's the expectation that always has been. When we ask people to self-isolate, that means stay at home, no interactions with anybody else. One of the issues that we've experienced, and obviously in this case, is that while we moved the rest of the country to different alert levels, there were a group of people who were always required throughout that period to be at home, and some haven't been.
Dr Bloomfield, can you give us any more details about Case M and the person-to-person contact, how you think he actually might have contracted the virus?
Well, what our contact tracers, the team in Auckland, have been able to establish is a link between the two families, actually not with KCM, but with another member of the family and that middle family that had the 5 cases. I don't have any further details about that, but from in terms of where we are now, that's hugely helpful information because it confirms the genome linkage that there is a good explanation for how cases M and N got infected. And the sense that we're not dealing with them having been infected through some casual exposure in the community.
When you say link, you mean that they were in the same place at the same time at some point? Or?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I cannot emphasise, if we're able to absolutely confirm that and confirm that contact between these families, how helpful that is to us. Because, of course, the risk we always have is even if we have a genome link that says they're really tightly connected, we don't always know whether or not there's been 1 or 2 people in between. In this case, the suggestion is there may not have been. It's a direct link, and that narrows down so many other potential chains of transmission. Just if you don't mind, Toby, I'll canvas around a little bit and then come back to you. Yeah, there, and then Ben.
Prime Minister, what's your message to businesses not paying employees their full wage during lockdown?
I've actually heard really helpful commentary from business leaders saying, look, we've all got a role to play. You know, some of you may have visited, for instance, health facilities. Well, they'll ask you before you go in, have you been tested recently? Are you identified as a close contact? Has any of your household been tested recently? Actually having our workplaces enforce some of those messages and ask those questions helps us do our job. We do everything we can to communicate what's required, but just having others who are in critical positions of responsibility, including workplaces, doing the same thing, and then supporting their workers to stay home is critical. And I do emphasise that again. We put in place this worker support regime a while ago because we anticipated, we never wanted anyone to say, I can't afford to stay at home. So my ask of employers, access the fund, support your workers to stay home.
Ben?
Consequences.
So New Zealand cricket have been devastated by this. They're going to have 60,000 people through the gates for the last three T20s against Australia.
Yeah.
They need that money, put bluntly. When you look at additional financial support for the governing body?
Oh, look, there are a number of events that have been affected by this this situation, a number of, you know, large-scale events, concerts and so on. And what I would say, of course, is we're devastated for those who are caught up in that, for the fans, for the people who have bought tickets, of course. But I think we all know that we've been operating in an environment where we've been very, very lucky to have been able to hold large-scale events where no one else in the world has. But with COVID does come the risk that from time to time we may be in a period where events cannot take place. It would be for the Minister for Sport to really discuss whether or not there's anything else there between the organising bodies, but certainly for the private sector, they've been having to wear this risk.
You're open to it, you're open to them coming to you though?
Oh, look, I'm just not in a position to be able to speak in any detail to anything in that regard. But I think all of us look with some gratitude at what we have been able to do, and we've always acknowledged that with large-scale events there are inherent risks when you're in the middle of a pandemic.
Just on COVID, on the alert level 2 for the rest of the country, I mean, if you establish that direct contact, that direct link, and negative tests start rolling through, could you see a reduction in the alert level for the rest of the country before the 7 days is up?
Look, what we set out from the very beginning is that the advice to us was 7 days. And I think some of the reason for that was the number of exposure events, the fact that often we don't get positives until sometimes 5 days after an exposure event, and wanting to make sure we give clear expectations around the likely length of time. So I'll defer to Dr Bloomfield, but the suggestion still is that the likely length of time is 7 days.
Yes, so our advice is in the first instance the 7 days. But of course, we're reviewing all the information on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Do you have open consideration for a scenario where there could be alert level 3 in Auckland and a level 1 in the rest of the country? Is that a viable prospect?
We did give consideration even to that in the very first instance. Our concern and consideration was, at that point, we were, of course, and remain observant of how many contacts there were in this case. It was too soon to say that we didn't have travel from outside of Auckland to other parts of the country. We didn't want to leave the rest of the country exposed, so we've taken that precautionary approach. But we will, as we look at all of the alert levels, keep looking at whether 2's necessary all the way through.
Instead of calling off the boxing event last night, given that you found out about the case in the afternoon, and also given the fact that both fighters are from South Auckland, are you concerned about the amount of people from Papatoetoe in particular who would have been there?
So a couple of things to really, it would be helpful to canvass there. So whilst I was advised at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we had almost no detail at that point. We knew he had a positive case, and at that point, the case self-identified as being linked to the high school. So at that point, we were not clear on whether or not this was potentially the contact of a student or someone within the schooling community, something that could have given a very simple and straightforward explanation that may not have had a lot of exposure events and therefore could have justified staying at lower alert levels. The level of detail required to make the decision to move alert levels really started coming in a few hours later. We convened Cabinet as quickly as we could after we had information from Public Health So that was coming through around 5:30 through till 6. Cabinet convened at 7:30. We discussed how we would manage large-scale events. The concern, and rightly so, was that we had both pride events, we had boxing, in some cases music events going on around the country. The ability to be able to shut down something midway through in an orderly fashion and then enforce it was very much in our thinking. And so that was why the decision was made that we always give lead time. In some cases, we've given 48 hours lead time. This was actually quite short.
Any additional concerns you might have given that both of those